Equal rights for women and girls have never been higher on the global agenda. Feminism was last year's word of the year. Me Too continues to trend. Governments, including Canada, have pledged to make gender equality a priority, and a variety of global campaigns are emerging to support women and girls. No question about it, it's critical for international aid to invest in all types of gender equality projects. For example, funding women's health, women-owned businesses, and girls' education. However, gains such as the recognition of reproductive rights, women's increased economic power, and getting more girls in schools for longer cannot be sustained without effective women's movements. For example, the impact of investing in girls' education will be limited if local laws and customs allow for child marriages and female genital mutilation. And if women cannot own property, they face huge barriers in becoming economically independent. Research shows that strong women's movements are the best way to secure and protect the rights of women and girls. They are better predictors of progress towards gender equality than national wealth, political parties, or even the number of women in government. Women's rights organizations and movements are formed and led by feminists working to advance women's human rights. It's proven that their hard work not only advances gender equality, but brings about peace and security, as well as human rights for all. It's the women's movement that played a fundamental role in ending the civil war in Liberia. It's the women's movement that achieved reproductive rights across Canada. It's the women's movements that won the right for women to drive in Saudi Arabia. Yet, these organizations and movements get very little money and support from governments and other funders. Latest figures show that only 0.3% of Canada's gender-focused aid reached women's rights organizations directly. To be clear, we're not talking about total international assistance, just gender-focused aid, and still only a tiny fraction reached feminist movements. If gender equality and women's rights are priorities, this lack of funding just doesn't add up. After all, it's these movements that drive social progress, push for changes in laws, and hold governments accountable. Local women's organizations understand the challenges on the ground and have demonstrated their ability to find innovative and holistic solutions. If we are to implement a feminist approach to foreign policy and international aid, women's movements and feminist organizations must be front and center. In this time of global uncertainty, but also of great opportunity for change, we call on you to speak up for women's rights, support increased funding to women's rights organizations and movements, and work alongside us.